They smiled like it was normal, like this wasn't a betrayal wrapped in soft tones and expensive perfume. Jason, my brother, kissed my cheek, pressed 2 strollers into my hands, and said it like a joke. "We're heading to Dubai. You'll be fine with the kids." Then he was gone. Just like that. No instructions, no apology, not even eye contact. I stood there on the platform overnight bag by my feet, fingers still curled around the small candle I'd picked out for Mom. Bergamot and cedar, the ones she used to light when I was little and sick. I thought, maybe we'd talk again like that, quiet, side by side. Maybe she'd finally see that I wasn't broken, just bruised. But she didn't even come inside the station. She waved from the car, designer duffel in her lap. "You're a lifesaver," she called out through the open window. "I'll Venmo you later." You needed the distraction anyway. I didn't speak, didn't cry, just nodded. The 2 kids, my niece and nephew, stared up at me confused but trusting. One of them had sticky fingers. The other was half asleep. They didn't know what had just happened. But I did. My name is Lauren Mitchell. I'm 38 years old, and up until that moment, I thought grief had made me invisible. Turns out, it had made me useful. Useful enough to carry other people's choices. Useful enough to be left at a train station with someone else's children while the people who claimed to love me boarded a plane for luxury and silence. And I think they assumed I'd stay silent too. That I'd carry the weight like always. That I'd do what I was told because that's what quiet daughters do right. But they didn't know I had a number in my phone they'd never guessed. A name they never said out loud anymore. Camille Alston, Jason's ex-wife, the mother of these children. The woman they said had abandoned them. I had never dialed her before. But now, holding her son's hand and her daughter's blanket, I called. The phone rang once, then twice. I didn't even know if she'd pick up. I only had the number because I'd kept it quietly the day she was erased from every photo frame in Mom's house. She answered on the 3rd ring. Her voice was cautious, quiet. I introduced myself slowly. "Camille, it's Lauren." There was a long pause. I heard something in her throat like breath held too long. She said my name back once carefully. "Lauren Mitchell, from the family." That word hit hard. Family. The same family that told everyone Camille had walked away, that she'd snapped after the divorce, that she couldn't handle motherhood. But the version I got from Camille that night was different. She spoke slowly like someone who hadn't told this truth out loud in years. Jason had filed for emergency custody while she was in the hospital recovering from a breakdown. He'd presented fake documents to the court, even to immigration. And Mom had supported him through it all, wrote letters calling Camille unstable, dangerous, unfit. They told the world I left, Camille said, her voice breaking, but the truth is I was pushed out of it. The ache in her voice wasn't dramatic. It was something quieter, older, like a door that had been closed too long. I told her the kids were with me, safe. There was a silence I didn't fill. Then she asked, "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," I said. "You have 24 hours. My train ticket has your name now." She didn't cry, not then, but I could hear something unlock on the other side of the line, something that had been waiting patient and powerless for someone to say, "I believe you." I hung up and looked down at the children. They were eating crackers off the station bench like it was all normal. But nothing about this was normal. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt like someone holding the one thing this family never gave me. Choice. I didn't go home. I didn't want my apartment with its too-quiet kitchen and half-finished knitting projects and the framed sonogram still hidden in my dresser drawer. Instead, I called an old friend Trish, someone from my law firm days who owed me nothing but always showed up when I asked. She lived an hour outside the city in a little cottage with woods on all sides and no one asking questions. That's where I took the kids. They didn't know me. Not really. I was the aunt who sent birthday cards and brought puzzles at Christmas. But they didn't cry. I think they could feel something was different the way I moved slower, softer. The way I didn't raise my voice or yank their hands or tell them to sit still every 5 seconds. I made them oatmeal, wiped jelly from tiny cheeks, tucked them into a blanket fort on Trish's sofa, and read Goodnight Moon 3 times. And when they finally fell asleep, their breath light and steady, I sat at the edge of the couch and let the silence thicken around me. I should have spoken sooner, because here's the truth no one asked me for. I'd known something was wrong with Jason's story months ago. I'd seen the court filings, quietly checked the docket just out of curiosity. Then I found the discrepancies: the travel consent form with Camille's forged signature, the withdrawal slips from the kid's college fund 2 days after he filed for sole custody. I'd saved them, all of them, not because I planned anything, but because part of me didn't believe him either. Still, I said nothing. I was grieving. I was tired. Well, they told me I was fragile, that I needed something to hold on to, that helping Jason's family would give me purpose. And maybe for a while I believed them. Maybe I thought I had no right to question the narrative when I could barely get out of bed. But now, holding their children, Camille's children, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just a witness. I was a bystander, and I'd stayed silent because silence felt easier than being accused of disloyalty. So I let them keep lying about Camille, about the past, about me. What kind of family builds itself on that? And more importantly, what kind of woman keeps holding the weight when she knows it was never hers? Camille landed just after sunrise. I met her at the edge of baggage claim, oversized hoodie pulled low over her curls, eyes scanning for threats or maybe for ghosts. She looked smaller than I remembered, not weaker, just real. Not the myth Mom had painted. She was carrying nothing but a canvas tote, one shoe untied. Her hands kept twitching like she wasn't sure what she was allowed to touch anymore. When she saw me, she didn't run, didn't collapse or make a scene. She just stood there and asked, "They're really safe. They're napping," I said, under a pile of dinosaur blankets. They made a fort out of couch cushions and declared it a spaceship. Camille's breath hitched. Her eyes welled, but she didn't cry, not yet. Instead, she nodded like someone who'd trained herself to withhold joy, because joy had become dangerous. I drove her back in silence. The trees blurred past the windows. Somewhere along the way, I told her about Trish, about the tea, about the oatmeal, about the fact that the little one still had jelly on his chin. Camille smiled the kind of smile that isn't happy, yet just relieved not to be erased. When we got to the house, she stepped inside like she didn't trust the floor. And when her son whispered "Mommy" like a question he wasn't sure he was allowed to ask, that's when it happened. Camille didn't sob. She dropped to her knees, wrapped her arms around both children, and whispered something I didn't hear. They clung to her like roots, reaching for soil they hadn't felt in a year. I turned away, not because I couldn't watch, but because something inside me understood I didn't need to. There was no space in that moment for anyone but them. Later, while they napped again, this time tangled around Camille like they were afraid she'd disappear, I made us tea, the same mug I'd used the night before, still warm. She looked at me across the kitchen island and said, "Why are you doing this?" I didn't have a speech. I didn't want credit, or apology, or redemption. I just said, "Because someone should have." And no one did. She nodded like that was the only answer that ever made sense. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Camille had her children now, yes. But Jason still had the paperwork, the story, the system on his side. And I still had the strollers. 2 pieces of silent evidence they'd handed me like luggage. No questions, no guilt, just expectation. And that more than anything would become their undoing. That night, Camille braided her daughter's hair at the kitchen table. The boy was already asleep on the couch, thumb tucked into his palm, his dinosaur fort now just a sagging pile of cushions and blankets. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like a lullaby I hadn't heard in years. I sat across from her sipping the last of the lukewarm tea and opened my laptop. Not for emails, not for news, but for the folder I had quietly built over months, the one labeled simply "In Case." Inside were screenshots, bank records, travel receipts, a voice memo from Jason recorded one afternoon when I'd visited to drop off groceries, and he'd rambled without noticing my phone was on the table recording. It's not like she's coming back. Even if she did, who'd listen? She doesn't have anything. I've got the house, the custody moms backing hell, even the church. He laughed. I didn't. I never said anything at the time. I'd just nodded, then gone home and uploaded the file. Because after my miscarriage, I didn't sleep much. And when you can't sleep, you either fall apart or you get organized. So I got organized. I started reading family court guidelines, started asking quiet questions at the law library downtown, started gathering things people assumed I was too broken to notice. I never planned to use them. But now the strollers were in my possession. Now Camille was here. And now I wasn't just the woman they'd left at the train station. I was the woman holding proof. I sent the first batch of files to Renee, my college roommate. We hadn't spoken in years, but I remembered she worked in immigration law. She called me 10 minutes later. Lauren, this isn't a custody fight. This is an international custodial violation. If your brother tries to bring the kids back without clearance, the State Department can intervene. I blinked. Wait. Legally? She laughed, not unkindly. Legally, loudly, permanently. I didn't ask how she'd move so fast. I just said thank you. And while Camille read Goodnight Moon again in the other room, I sat at Trish's desk and drafted a motion under the Hague Convention. Not because I wanted revenge, but because for once I wasn't just reacting. I was responding. Because they didn't just lie about Camille. They lied about me. And I'd been quiet for so long they forgot I was still listening. But now I was done listening. And I had just started speaking. By Sunday morning, Jason had started to panic. The first text came with a smiley face. Hey, how are my angels? Send pics. I didn't respond. The second one dropped the emoji. The third asked for a call. By the fifth missed call, he switched tactics. Hey, small mix-up. We'll be back soon. Just keep 'em fed and happy. Thanks, sis. That word sis landed like a bruise, as if abandoning a grieving woman with 2 toddlers was the same as asking her to water the plants while you're away. I still didn't respond. I didn't need to. Camille's lawyer had already filed for emergency custody. Immigration had frozen Jason's return until the hearing. And Renee had flagged the travel consent form he'd forged last summer, the one he slipped past TSA when flying solo with the kids. Jason thought this was still a negotiation, but it wasn't. They had forgotten one thing. I didn't just survive grief. I studied law inside it. I never warned them, never hinted. I let them dig the hole themselves. I just handed them the shovel. By Monday, he tried FaceTime. He was calling from the rooftop of some luxury hotel in Dubai, drink in hand, fireworks blooming behind him. Where are the kids? Mom says she hasn't heard anything. I stared at the screen. He looked so smug, so certain. They're with their mother, I said quietly. He blinked. What, Camille has them? Legally. He laughed too loud, too fast. You're bluffing. I'm not. And I wouldn't recommend trying to fly home next week. He cursed, then threatened, then begged. You think this makes you some kind of hero? No, I said. It makes me an aunt who's not afraid of silence anymore. And I hung up. That night, Ellen showed up at my apartment. No warning, no knock, just mascara running down her cheeks and a trembling voice. You destroyed this family. I let her speak. She said I was ungrateful, that Jason had worked so hard, that I'd embarrassed her in front of everyone, that I couldn't possibly understand the sacrifices she'd made for that family. Then she said it soft but sharp. You've never even held a child of your own. That one cut deeper than the rest. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just looked at her and said, You didn't want a daughter. You wanted an assistant. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Because for the first time, I wasn't the one lost for what to say. The custody motion made headlines in our local paper, not because Jason was important. He wasn't, but because the story was too strange to ignore. Father leaves kids with grieving sister at train station while jetting to Dubai. That was the headline. But the subtext was louder. How dare she fight back? My inbox flooded. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years, aunts who once hugged me at funerals. Some wrote, You did the right thing. I had no idea what you were going through. Others were more familiar. You humiliated your mother. This could have been handled privately. But I wasn't ashamed. I wasn't hiding anymore. Because what no one, not even Ellen, seemed to understand was this. 6 months ago, I sat on the floor of my bathroom with a bottle of pills in one hand and silence in the other. Not because I didn't want to live, but because living felt like screaming into an empty house where no one came to check. No one answered my calls. No one asked how I was after the hospital visit, after the procedure. They just said I needed purpose. And do you know who finally called me back? Renee, my old college roommate, the one they called too loud, too liberal, too career-driven. She picked up on the first ring, and when I told her everything, the train station, the strollers, the silence, she said your brother violated an international custodial order. I blinked. Wait, legally, loudly, permanently, she said. If he tries to bring them back without clearance, the State Department can step in. And they did. Suddenly, Jason wasn't just a bad father. He was a risk. He couldn't fly home without a formal clearance process. He couldn't even see his kids until the next court date. Mom went into full defense mode, church luncheons, PTA friends, charity circles. She started spinning, said I was unstable, said I'd acted out since the miscarriage, said she'd had to take control for my own good. But the thing about truth is, once it gets out, it doesn't go quietly. A woman named Cynthia, one of Ellen's oldest friends, messaged me privately. Your mother's saying a lot, but I've known her too long. I know what control looks like, and that's when I realized they weren't just trying to silence me, they were trying to rewrite me. At night, while the kids slept with their legs tangled and Camille folded onesies into neat little piles, we sat side by side on the living room floor. The laptop open between us. There were folders, voice notes, screenshots, email threads where Mom told Jason to move fast to get Camille out before she gets smart, photos of the kids at the train station eating crackers off the floor, no car seat in sight, and there was a name I had been saving, a woman they never saw coming, Melinda, Camille's cousin, court-appointed child advocate, the kind of woman who could part an ocean in a courtroom just by clearing her throat. By noon, the next day, Melinda had filed a motion barring Jason from any unsupervised access until a full custody hearing. By 3:00 p.m., we had surveillance footage from the train station. By dinner, Mom called again. This time she was crying. I didn't know. I thought it was just a break. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. He didn't mean to lie. She didn't mean to manipulate. They always didn't mean. But I finally saw the shape of it. They never meant to love me. They meant to use me because I was there, because I was quiet, because I had nothing else going on. You packed my brother for Dubai, I told her, and handed me 2 toddlers like it was a favor. There was silence. Then her voice brittle because you had nothing else going on. I almost laughed. The grief, the therapy, the clawing to feel like a human being again. To her, that was nothing. But now I had the one thing they never expected: power. Not over them, but from them. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just submitted the final documents. And when the court date came, Camille walked in wearing navy blue, a binder full of receipts and photos in her hands. I sat behind her in black, not mourning. I wore black so they'd know the woman they thought they buried never died. The judge barely glanced at Jason. The Dubai trip, the false paperwork, the public neglect. It was over before it started. Camille was granted full legal and physical custody. Jason was offered limited supervised visitation pending parenting classes. He didn't look at me, just stared at the floor like it had betrayed him too. Outside the courtroom, Camille turned to me and whispered, "You saved me." I shook my head. "No," I said. "We saved each other, and I meant it." That week, my mother sent me an invitation in the mail, gold embossed, heavy envelope, like it meant something. Family dinner? Sunday at 6:00. Let's heal. I didn't go. That Sunday, I was at the park with Camille and the kids pushing strollers and laughing until my cheeks hurt. We bought lemonade from 2 kids with a crooked stand and shared fries off a paper tray. Healing didn't need a dinner table hosted by the people who broke me. It needed boundaries. It needed truth. Later that month, Camille moved to a place across town close enough for visits. Jason went back to court, this time for tax fraud. Turns out the man who left his children at a train station had left other messes too. And Mom. She never apologized, but she did call one night, quiet and tired. "You're really not coming back, are you?" I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "You told me I was fragile, Mom. But it turns out I'm fireproof." And I hung up, not out of anger, out of self-respect. Because sometimes revenge doesn't look like rage. Sometimes it looks like not being the glue anymore, and never offering to hold them together again. Weeks later, I got a card in the mail. Crayon drawing, 2 stick figures holding hands, one labeled Mommy, the other Miss Lauren. Written underneath in crooked blue letters, "Thank you for finding my mommy." And that was the closure. Not the court ruling, not the headlines, not even the final voicemail. Just a child safe, loved, and finally heard. Because in the end, the greatest revenge is not becoming them.